Before the first cry of freedom, there is a system. It stretches across the land like an invisible structure, ordered, powerful, uncheckable. Long before Moses stands before Pharaoh, before the plagues, before the sea divides, Egypt is already alive. And it does not look fragile, it looks eternal. The sun rises over the Nile with a slow, deliberate glow. Light spreads across the river's surface, turning it into a moving band of gold. The water flows steadily, predictable, dependable, the heartbeat of a civilization that has learned not just to survive, but to dominate its environment. You stand at the edge of that river, and immediately you understand something. Everything begins here. The Nile is not just a river. It is Egypt's lifeline, its calendar, its economy, its power. Each year, it floods, rising beyond its banks, spilling into the surrounding land, depositing rich, dark silt that transforms dry earth into fertile ground. Crops grow because of it, cities rise because of it. And because it is so consistent, Egypt believes it is secure, stable, favored. You look around. Fields stretch outward from the river banks, divided into careful sections. Workers move through them in coordinated rhythm, planting, tending, harvesting. Irrigation channels guide water with precision, ensuring that nothing is wasted. This is not chaotic agriculture. This is controlled, engineered, measured, and behind that control is power. You follow the river toward a larger settlement. And as you approach, the scale begins to change. Mudbrick homes cluster together, first simple, functional, built quickly, but with purpose. Narrow streets weave between them. People move through these spaces, constantly carrying goods, leading animals, exchanging information. But beyond this layer, the structures rise. Stone replaces mud, columns appear, massive walls, temples, monuments, and suddenly, Egypt reveals itself not just as a land of survival, but as a land of dominance. You stand before one of these temples. It towers above everything around it, massive stone blocks stacked with precision, carved with images that tell a story of power, divinity, and order. Pharaoh is everywhere, depicted larger than life, victorious, eternal. The gods stand beside him, Ra, Amen, Osiris, figures carved into stone, painted with colors that still cling to the surface despite time. This is not just architecture, it is propaganda, a declaration. Egypt is not just strong, it is divine, and Pharaoh is at the center of it all. You step inside the temple. The air cools instantly. Thick stone walls block the heat of the outside world. Light filters in through narrow openings, casting long shadows across columns covered in hieroglyphs. The scent of incense lingers. Priests move quietly, deliberately, performing rituals that maintain what they believe is the balance of the world, because in Egypt, order is everything. Mat, balance, harmony, the belief that the world functions correctly when everything remains in its proper place. And Pharaoh's role, to maintain that order at any cost. You leave the temple and return to the streets. The contrast is immediate, because not everyone experiences Egypt the same way. You move toward the outskirts, now toward areas where the structures are less refined, where the materials are more fragile, where life feels heavier. This is where the labor is, where the system is sustained. And this is where you begin to see them. The Hebrews, they do not stand out immediately. But as you watch more closely, patterns emerge. The work they are doing is harder, more relentless. Their movements carry exhaustion. Their clothing is simpler, worn from use. They are building, always building. You follow the sound of construction. It leads you to a massive project, walls rising, storage cities expanding, structures designed to hold Egypt's wealth and resources. And here, the system reveals its cost. Bricks are made from mud and straw, formed by hand, dried under the sun, stacked endlessly. You see men carrying loads across their backs, their steps slow, but forced forward by the presence of overseers. Whips hang at their sides, not always used, but always visible. A reminder, this is not voluntary. This is control. You hear voices orders given sharply in a language not their own, Egyptian, authority enforced through sound as much as action, and among the workers. You begin to sense something deeper, not just fatigue, not just physical strain, but memory. Because these people remember something else, a different life, a promise. Stories passed down through generations about a God who is not tied to temples of stone. A God who does not require monuments to prove his power. A God who made a covenant, and that memory refuses to disappear, even here, even under this system. You move closer, watching, listening, and then you notice something else. Children, not working yet. The watching, learning, absorbing, because this life is being passed down. And that is what makes it so heavy, because it feels permanent, unbreakable. Egypt does not look like a place that can be challenged. It does not look like a place that can be undone. Everything about it suggests stability, continuity, control, and yet, within this system, within this structure that seems so complete, something is already beginning to shift. Not visibly, not yet, but quietly, because somewhere in this land, a child has been born, hidden, protected, raised in a way no one would expect. And that child will grow to see all of this. The power, the oppression, the system. And he will stand at the center of it, not as a laborer, not as a subject, but as a disruptor, Moses. But that moment is still ahead, for now. Egypt stands unchallenged, unquestioned, and completely unaware of what is about to confront it. Years pass, but Egypt does not slow. If anything, it becomes more refined, more structured, more certain of itself. The Nile continues its rhythm, rising, falling, sustaining. Crops grow in cycles so reliable they feel almost guaranteed. Storehouses fill, trade expands. Monuments rise higher, and with every passing year, the illusion of permanence deepens. You walk again through the cities along the river, but this time, you notice something you didn't fully grasp before. Egypt is not just powerful. It is confident, confident in its gods, confident in its systems, confident that nothing can truly threaten what has been built, and that confidence is visible everywhere. In the way officials move through the streets measured, controlled, accustomed to authority. In the way scribes sit with papyrus and ink, recording transactions, laws, inventories, turning reality into something documented, organized, owned. In the way soldiers stand at key points disciplined, alert, representing a force that is rarely questioned. Egypt does not feel fragile. It feels inevitable. You pass by another temple, larger than the last. Massive pylons frame the entrance walls, sloping upward, covered in carvings of Pharaoh defeating enemies, standing alongside the gods, receiving divine approval. The message is clear. Egypt is backed by heaven, or at least, that is what it believes. Inside, the rituals continue, offerings are made. Prayers are spoken, incense burns, because maintaining favor with the gods is essential. If the Nile fails, if the crops fail, if chaos enters, everything collapses. So the system must be upheld at every level. You leave the temple and move toward the administrative heart of the city. Here, power becomes even more visible. Large courtyards, columns arranged in precise alignment, officials moving with purpose, delivering information, making decisions that ripple outward across the land. And somewhere within this structure is Pharaoh, not always seen, but always present. His authority does not depend on visibility. It is embedded, assumed, absolute. You don't need to see him to feel him. And that is what makes what Moses will do so unthinkable, because no one challenges Pharaoh. Not successfully, not openly, not without consequence. You move again toward the labor sites, because this is where the contrast becomes undeniable. The Hebrews are still here, still building, still enduring. But something has changed. It is subtle, but it's there. The work has intensified, the demands have increased. Because fear has entered the system, Pharaoh has noticed something. Not rebellion, not uprising, but growth. The Hebrews are multiplying, expanding, and in a system built on control. Growth outside that control becomes a threat. So the response is predictable: pressure, more labor. Harsher conditions, stronger enforcement. You watch as bricks are formed, again mud mixed with straw, shaped in molds, laid out under the relentless sun. But now, something is missing. Straw. The order has changed. The Hebrews must gather it themselves. The workload remains the same. But the resources are reduced, and the result is strain. You see it in their movements: slower, heavier, more desperate. And when the quotas are not met, punishment follows, not hidden, not subtle, visible, because fear is part of the system. It keeps everything in place. You hear voices raised, an overseer shouting, a worker pleading. And in that exchange, you feel the tension rising. Because this is no longer just labor. It is oppression, clear, defined, relentless. And yet, even here, something refuses to break. You notice it in their eyes, in the way they speak quietly among themselves, in the way they continue, not just physically, but internally. Because their identity has not been erased, not completely, they still remember the stories, the promises, the God of their ancestors. And that memory is dangerous, because it means they are not fully owned, not fully defined by Egypt. And that is what Pharaoh senses, even if he cannot fully understand it. So the pressure continues, and then it escalates. A decree, not whispered, not hidden, but enforced. Every Hebrew male child must not live. The order spreads quickly. Through officials, through midwives, through families, and suddenly fear changes shape. It is no longer just about survival in labor. It is about survival itself. You feel the weight of it immediately. Because this is not control anymore. This is elimination. An attempt to stop something before it can grow any further. But even here, the system does not fully succeed. Because not everyone obeys, midwives hesitate, families hide. Choices are made in quiet moments that push back against the order, small acts, but significant. Because they keep something alive, and in one of those moments, a child is hidden, protected, placed somewhere no one would expect. In the river itself, the Nile, the very source of Egypt's life, becomes the place where this child survives. You move toward the water again, watching as it flows unchanged, indifferent to what it carries. Reeds line the edges, soft, concealing, and there, a basket, small, unassuming, floating just enough to stay above the current. And within it, the future of everything you have seen, Moses. But the irony runs deeper. Because he is not just hidden in Egypt, he is raised by it, taken into Pharaoh's household, given access to the very system that oppresses his people. He will walk these halls, see these temples, understand this power from the inside. And that changes everything, because when the time comes, he will not speak as an outsider. He will stand as someone who has seen both worlds. And that makes his role unavoidable. You stand there, watching the river carry its quiet movement forward. Egypt still stands, still strong, still certain. But now, something has entered its story that it cannot control, not yet, not visibly, but inevitably. Because what Moses will see, what he will confront, will not just challenge Egypt's power, it will expose its limits. But that moment is still coming. For now, the system holds, the river flows. The empire stands unaware that the very land it depends on is already carrying the beginning of its undoing. Years pass, and Moses grows within the heart of Egypt, not at its edges, not among the laborers, but inside its power. You follow him now not as a child hidden in reeds, but as a man walking through corridors few others ever see. The palace rises above the city, elevated, structured, intentional. Its walls are smooth, decorated with carvings and color, designed not just for function, but for display. Power must be seen, and here it is. Servants move quietly through the halls, trained to anticipate, to respond without hesitation. Officials pass by in ordered rhythm, carrying scrolls, delivering reports, managing the vast machinery of an empire that never truly stops moving. And Moses walks among them, clothed like them, educated like them, taught their language, their systems, their worldview. He understands Egypt, not from observation, but from within. He has seen the temples from the inside, the rituals, the offerings, the claims of divine authority. He knows how Pharaoh is presented not just as ruler, but as a living god. He has seen the administration, the records, the organization, the control over land, labor, and life itself. He knows the strength of this system and that knowledge matters, because it means when he looks outward, toward the fields, toward the labor, he does not see it with ignorance, he sees it with clarity. You follow him beyond the palace walls, back to where the bricks are made, where the labor never ends. And this time, he does not just observe, he feels it. Because this is his people, not by upbringing, but by origin. And that tension between where he was raised and who he is begins to surface. You see it in the way he watches, longer, more intensely. Not detached anymore, not neutral. He notices the strain in their bodies, the weight of their work, the presence of fear. And then, the moment an overseer, a Hebrew worker, violence, quick, brutal, unjust, and something in Moses breaks. Not gradually, not carefully, but suddenly. He steps forward, intervenes, and the system reacts the only way it knows how, with consequence. The overseer falls, and just like that, Moses crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed. You feel the shift immediately, because this is no longer internal conflict. This is action, and action changes everything. He looks around, no witnesses, or so it seems. The body is hidden, the moment buried, but not erased. Because the next day it surfaces, not through Egypt, but through his own people. Who made you ruler and judge over us? The words land harder than the act itself. Because they reveal something Moses did not expect. He does not belong fully to either world, not Egypt, not Israel. And that realization forces movement. Because now staying is no longer possible. The palace, the power, the identity he has known, it all falls away. And Moses leaves Egypt, not as a leader, not as a deliverer, but as a fugitive. You watch him move away from the land that raised him, across terrain that grows harsher, less structured, less controlled. Egypt fades behind him, the river, the monuments. The system, all of it recedes, and in its place, something else begins: silence, distance, time, because the next phase of his life will not happen in the center of power. It will happen far from it, but Egypt continues unchanged, or so it seems. You return your focus to the land he left behind, because nothing has collapsed, the temples still stand. The Nile still flows, the labor continues. Pharaoh still rules from the outside. Nothing suggests that anything significant has occurred because one man leaving does not shake an empire, not immediately. But what Egypt does not see is that something has begun. Not in its courts, not in its temples, but outside of it, and that is what makes it dangerous. Because systems like this only know how to respond to visible threats, armies, rebellions, force, but what is coming will not look like that. You walk again through the labor sites. The Hebrews are still there, still working, still enduring. But something in their story is moving forward. Even if they cannot see it yet, even if they do not know it yet. Because the one who will stand before Pharaoh is no longer here. He is being shaped somewhere else, prepared, not by Egypt, but in opposition to it, and that preparation will take time, years, decades. Because what he will face cannot be rushed. You stand at the edge of the Nile once more. The water flows as it always has, consistent, reliable, unquestioned. Egypt still believes in its permanence, its stability, its control over the world it has built. But you see it differently now. Because you know something Egypt does not, that the man who has just left will return, and when he does, he will not come alone. He will come with something Egypt cannot understand, cannot control, cannot resist, not because it lacks power, but because it has never encountered anything like it. And when that moment arrives, everything Moses once saw in this land, the temples, the river, the system, the certainty will be tested and found limited, but for now, Egypt stands unchallenged, unaware, and completely unprepared. For what is coming next, Egypt still breathes with confidence. Nothing about its surface has changed. The Nile rises and falls with the same precision. Priests continue their rituals. Pharaoh sits in authority, unchallenged, unquestioned. The cities remain full, the labor ongoing, the system intact. If you stand here now, you would never guess what is about to happen. Because Egypt does not look like a nation on the edge of collapse. It looks like a nation at its peak, and then Moses returns. Not as the man who fled, not uncertain, not divided, but resolved. You see him approach the land again, but this time, everything feels different. Because he is no longer shaped by Egypt, he has been shaped in the wilderness. In silence, in distance, in encounters that have nothing to do with power as Egypt understands it. And that is what makes him dangerous. He walks back into the same world, the same river, the same cities, the same palace, but he does not carry the same perspective. He stands before Pharaoh, and for the first time, the system is directly confronted. Let my people go. The words are simple, but they carry something Egypt has never had to face, a command not rooted in its own authority, not negotiated, not requested, declared, and Pharaoh's response is immediate, dismissal. Who is this God that I should obey him? The question is not just defiance, it is identity. Because Egypt does not recognize any authority above its own. And that is where the collision begins, not between two men, but between two understandings of power. You feel it immediately, because from this point forward, everything Moses once saw will begin to unravel. The Nile, the source of life, turns, its waters darken, thicken, become undrinkable. The river that defined Egypt now resists it. Fish die, the smell spreads. The people react with confusion first, then concern, because this is not supposed to happen. The Nile is stable, reliable, divine, and yet it has changed. Pharaoh resists. Of course he does. Because one disruption is not enough to break a system built over centuries. But then another and another. Frogs everywhere, not contained. Not manageable in homes, in beds, in food. What was once a symbol of life becomes overwhelming, unavoidable. Then gnats, flies, livestock struck. Skin diseased, the pattern intensifies, each moment targeting something Egypt trusts. Something Egypt depends on. You move through the land as it unfolds. And for the first time, you see uncertainty. Not in the Hebrews, in Egypt, because the system is being challenged. Not from the outside, but from within its own foundations. The gods they trust are not responding. The order they maintain is breaking and still. Pharaoh holds his position because power does not release easily. Not even when it is clearly being confronted. The sky darkens, not with night, but with something else. A storm, violent, precise, hail strikes the land with force. Crops are destroyed, trees shattered. The very resources Egypt depends on are taken, and now fear spreads, not contained, not controlled. Because this is no longer inconvenience. This is loss, and still Pharaoh resists. Because admitting weakness wouldn't do everything, and then darkness. Not shadow, not cloud, but a darkness that feels present, thick, unnatural. It settles over the land. And for 3 days, Egypt cannot see, cannot move freely, cannot function as it always has. The sun, one of its greatest symbols of divine order, is gone. And now, everything Egypt believed to be constant has been shaken, and still Pharaoh refuses. Because this is no longer about reason, it is about control. And control does not surrender easily. You feel the tension reach its peak because everything has led to this. One final moment, one final confrontation, and then the night, quiet, heavy, different from every night before it, because something is about to happen. That will mark Egypt permanently. You move through the land, through homes, through streets, through spaces that have always felt secure. And you sense it, the weight, the stillness. And then it happens, not loudly, not publicly, but decisively. And when morning comes, Egypt is not the same. You see it in the faces, in the movement, in the sound that rises across the land, grief, widespread, uncontainable. Because for the first time, the system has been broken, not challenged, not strained, broken. Pharaoh calls for Moses, not as a ruler, but as a man who has lost. Go, the word is different now, not resistant, not defiant, final, and just like that, everything changes. You watch as the Hebrews gather, not as laborers, but as a people moving, leaving the same land that once held them, releases them, and Egypt can no longer stop it. You stand at the edge of the city as they go, thousands, families, movement that feels impossible yet undeniable, and behind them, Egypt remains, the temples still stand, the river still flows, the structures are still there. But something is gone, certainty, because what Moses saw when he first walked this land, power, control, stability has been revealed as something else, temporary, limited. And as the people move further away, toward a future they cannot yet see, you realize something that reframes everything. Egypt was never as uncheckable as it appeared. It only seemed that way until it was tested. And when it was, it could not hold. And the man who once walked these streets, who saw all of this with his own eyes, did not just witness Egypt, he witnessed its limits. And that is what changed history forever.